This is my Murphy Renegade biplane. I'm up to the stage where I want to make some of the fuel lines for this aeroplane, and it occurred to me that perhaps you might be interested in having a look what I do to make my fuel lines up. So here's some of the things that you may need in order to do the fuel line bending and cutting and flaring. That's what we're going to look at today. So step one, when you buy your aluminium fuel line, it'll come more or less supplied like this. In a roll, probably have some plastic wrap over it to stop it from vibrating and damaging itself in transit. This tubing is really, really soft and really, really easy to straighten. For instance, here's the end of the tube here. We can easily bend it straight by hand. Look at that. And if you invest the time in it, you can actually get it dead straight. If you invest enough time and patience, you can make really straight. You can make the curved pipe really straight again. Okay. This comes in different sizes. This particular one is 3/8 of an inch. That'll become important because we need all the fittings and so on to match 3/8 tubing. Or it also comes in 1/4 inch. They're the two popular sizes for home build aeroplanes anyway. This is a 1/4 inch tube here, which is just similar to the other one, except it's a lot smaller. And the flow is the flow that you can put through this 1/4 inch tube is way less, of course, than the 3/8 tube. Not much bigger, but the flow is hugely bigger. Now, I'll work with the 1/4 inch tubing as much as I can today because I'm simply not using the 1/4 inch tubing for anything else. This is my spare tube. The 3/8 tube I do intend to plumb the aeroplane with it, so I don't really want to use it up. Otherwise, I have to order more from my favourite shop, Aircraft Spruce. So okay, so let's say we want to bend this tube. We've got a couple of different ways of doing it. Let's just put it here for a minute. We can use this. Well, let's look at the cheapest method. These springs come as a set of 6 for different size tubing. The 1/4 inch one, of course, is this small one. I think that's the correct one for 1/4 inch tube. Yeah, look at that, perfect. So you put the tube, you put the spring along the tube where you want to bend it, and then you use the spring so that you don't kink the tube, and you can bring it around to whatever sort of angle you want. And you can get quite a reasonably neat job out of that, and then just simply remove the spring. And there you are with your curve in the tube, or your bend in the tube. I've had some success with those. And they work really, really well in close quarters as well, where you haven't got much room, because the other option is this tool here. Now this particular tool is only for 3/8 tubing. If you wanted to bend 1/4 inch tubing, you'd have to buy another one of these tools, or some of them actually come with 2 sets of, I guess we'll call that a mandrel. Some will come with 2 different size mandrels so that you can do a couple of different size tubing with one tool. This particular one, though, only does 3/8 tubing. I'll show you quickly one piece of 3/8 tubing. Yeah, we want to put, let's say we want to put a 45-degree bend on the end of this pipe here. We'll get a bit of straight pipe for starters. Yeah, that's about as, let's work it and get it reasonably straight. Yeah, that's more or less straight. Okay, righto, put the tube up here, latch it down, and then this piece will be used to bend the tubing. Now, you can guess at 45 degrees. There are some degree markings around the edge of the tool. So let's say we could bring it around to about 45 degrees here, which will be probably that mark there. Yeah. Around to there. When the edge of the tool lines up with that mark, we should be about 45 degrees. And yep, that would be pretty close to a 45-degree bend. The tubing is not kinked. It's pretty good, and it's ready to put a flare on the end. Yeah, I won't flare it. I'll put that away. We'll work with the quarter-inch one instead. All right. I guess first of all, okay, so we discussed bending it. There's two different methods, the spring method and this complicated bending tool. You really need to operate this tool out in the open. It doesn't work in close quarters, in a confined space, very well at all. Whereas the springs will work in a confined area. Now, to cut the tubing, we use one of these, a tube cutter. I've got 3 different ones here. There's this small snap-on one, which I've used for years and years. This rigid one, which works really, really well also. I like that one. And there's this cheap, just a cheap hardware store thing that probably cost me $3, you know, I mean, and it works quite well as well. So, but you do need a tube cutter. Here's a piece of 1/4-inch tube that I've just cut the end off. Now, before we go flaring this tool, let's look at the cutting first. We'll use this rigid tool because it's nice and easy to use. We'll bring it down, cut off we've worked out how long we want this piece of tubing that I've got in my hand. And we simply adjust the tool up and we cut it off at this particular spot. For some reason, we've worked out what spot it is. Yeah, we just tighten the tool down a little bit more, and there it is. We've cut that much off. So now this piece of pipe is the correct length. Unfortunately, there's a burr on the end of this pipe. We can't, or we shouldn't, just go ahead and flare this tool, flare the tube. We've got a couple of different options for flaring the tube. We must probably speak about those now, I guess. There's this option, which is basically a series of clamps that'll clamp down on the appropriate size tubing, and it has a piece that slides on over the top and makes a flare with this conical piece sticking out the top here. Its benefit is that it's relatively cheap. It was, I don't know, might have been $50 or $60, I suppose, years ago. I bought these tools I've had for 30 years probably. This tool was much more expensive, probably closer to $150. and works really, really well, and it's really, really nice, but like this bending tool, it doesn't do close quarters very well. You get it into a confined area, and yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work particularly well at all. But it will do smaller tube. This will go down to 1/8. 1/8 tube is pretty small. This one won't. This doesn't go down that small. I think, yeah, I don't know what this. It does quarter anyway. Whatever that is, 3/16. Yeah, 3/16 is probably the smallest you'd want to go. Okay, now, so we're going to use one of these tools. Now, if we just go ahead and flare this tubing now, without doing anything to this edge that we just cut, we're probably going to wind up with a fairly bad flare, a fairly ordinary sort of flare. Now, obviously, if we're going to put a flare, we're doing it for a reason. We're doing it to install one of these flare nuts. So we put the flare nut on next, and then we put the sleeve on, which should fit neatly, yeah, which it does, okay. Then we can put our flare on, and the nut will pull back up and pull this fitting into the flare. That's the objective. Let's see if we can do that. So we'll use this tool for starters. Let's have a look here. So the third hole along is 1/4 inch, and this is 1/4 inch tube. Unfortunately, that hole is square on that side, and the flare is going to go on this side. So we open that up, put the tube in. We won't wind it up just yet, because this is a clamping. This tool, this wing nut, provides the clamping force. And we want a little tiny bit of tube sticking out the end. Probably only about that much, less than that. Maybe that much. Yeah. Now we haven't done anything to this tubing to clean it up. Okay, we're just going to make a flare on it. Yeah. So fit the tool loosely like this. Let it find its own place, its own happy spot. Then I'll put a little tiny bit of oil of some description. I'm just using a bit of silicone oil this time, but any sort of oil. Okay, and then we're going to wind it down. And as we wind it down, that cone is going to go into the tube and form a flare. Now we wind it down until it stops. We don't crank it down. We don't put a tool on here and really whiz it down. This is a big wing nut. You can put a lot of force on with that wing nut. But we open it up and remove that. And there's our flare. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, it looks halfway decent. We take this tool off, this part of the tool off, open those jaws up, and there's our piece of pipe made up. Now if we feel this, because we didn't deburr it and didn't clean it up, this feels pretty ordinary. Matter of fact, if you pushed it like that into your finger and turned it, you probably wind up cutting your finger. It's horrible. Now obviously if this pipe's going to crack, that's where the crack's going to start. So we don't do that. You can't just put a flare on the end of a piece of pipe. You have to clean the piece of pipe up properly first. But in the scheme of things, look at that. That would work. That would actually come up. I've got a fitting here. I've got a steel fitting here somewhere. Oh, here on our electric fuel pump. I've got a facet pump here that I'm intending to install in this aeroplane. This particular fitting's steel. These blue ones are aluminium, but it's the right size. And there's our pipe fitted up to our fuel pump. No worries at all. Now, we could use this. I wouldn't trust it. because it's rough. It's a very rough finish, and we don't do rough finishes on aeroplanes. So that needs to be polished first before we do the flare, and then it'll last probably the life of the aeroplane. Yeah, so let's just cut that off and start again. Where's our cutter? Here's the rigid one that we used before. We put it back in the cutter, the flare sticking out the end. But this would work. You could make this work. But it's not how we build aeroplanes. We build a go-kart that way or something, but not an aeroplane. Not if I'm going to fly in it anyway. So, we're not quite there. There it is. And cut the flare off. Now, what we should have done. I've got a deburring tool here, which is just basically a crank that turns this cutter. We put the cutter in the end of the tubing, and just turn it very, very gently. I'm not forcing it into the end of the tube. I don't want to countersink the tube. All I want to do is take the burr off it. That probably halfway is reasonable. Yeah, that's much better than it was anyhow, put it that way. And if you wanted to be really super duper pedantic about it, you can polish this with a buffer. And as a matter of fact, that's what I intend doing right now. So just bear with. There's our polished piece of tubing. Obviously, you need to clean this tube afterwards because I can see debris down there. But that's okay. We can do that. We can blow some air through it or whatever. I'm not going to do that right now. Let's try this other flaring tool. Yeah, it's a bit more sophisticated, a bit more complicated. Doesn't really need that. This is made up with a couple of different size wheels. These wheels have got markings on them for the size. There's 3/8, there's 1/2 inch. Where are we? 3/4? Wow. 5/8, 7/16, 1/8. Oh, there's our quarter. And there's another set of wheels over this side. It's already dialed up to 1/4. This one's dialed up to 1/4. Okay. We put the pipe, our tube that we want to bend, we put that in. There's an indicator. Let's have a look here. This little device that you see there, a little aluminium coloured device. This one, little cast aluminium device. He's actually the indicator that shows you how far to insert the tube into these jaws. If you insert it too far, you're going to wind up with a great big mushroom-shaped flare, which is not going to work for you. Actually, we'll do that in a minute. Righto. So we lock the flaring tool there. A little tiny squirt of oil. That's all it takes, just the tiniest little bit. And away we go. Can you see there? You might be able to see. No, the bolt's in the way. How about this way? Yeah, there you can see. The tube's flaring up nicely. Again, we've reached the end. I'm not going to force it. We take it back. And there we go. Unwind that. Take the wing nut undone. And there's our flare. Looks pretty nice. Feels a little bit better than the other one. Matter of fact, it feels a lot better that way. I could do that all day and not cut my finger. and the flare fits on there nicely. Yeah, so we could install that on our fuel pump and away we go. With this steel fitting, I didn't mention, these blue fittings are all aluminium. This is my fuel selector valve that I intend installing in this aeroplane. These blue fittings are all aluminium. Typically, on the engine side of the firewall, you really need to start thinking about using steel fittings. That's what this fitting on the fuel pump is all about. It's on the other side of the firewall. So you can buy these, all of these fittings you can buy in either steel or aluminium. The steel ones can be quite expensive, that's the only problem. But there you go, there's a flare. So 2 different types of flaring tools. The cutter, don't try and cut the tube with a hacksaw. The end of the tube, really, the objective with a tube cutter is to make sure that where you cut the tube off is really 90 degrees to the axis of the tube. And there's no way, I guess you could cut it with a hacksaw or something and then put it on a sander or whatever and try and sand it straight. That might work, but it's easier just to use a tube cutter and it'll do it. It'll do it. Really nice job, really nice. There we go, a little bit more. And there's our end. Oh, no, not quite off yet. Now he is. There he is right there. And there's the end of the tube. So there you go. That's how you put a flare on an end of a tube. How to bend the tube. You know, it gets a bit more complicated, I suppose, when you start working out bend allowances and this sort of stuff. But really, for what we do, that's really all there is to it. Not that hard. Okay, if you got this far and you're still watching, thanks for watching. Bye now.